Bharadwaj coming up in the next 30 minutes. In a tragic incident, over 40 Indians killed in building fire in Kuwait. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds review meeting, directs officials to extend all possible assistance. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar speaks to Kuwaiti counterpart, assures full assistance and urges early repatriation of the mortal remains of those who lost their lives. Gaza ceasefire plan in balance as US says Hamas proposed changes. US Federal Reserve keeps key lending rate unchanged, one cut possible in 2024, down from the 3 expected in March. India beat USA by 7 wickets in ICC Men's T20 World Cup 2024, qualifies for Super 8 stage. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi chaired a review meeting on the fire tragedy in Kuwait, in which around 40 Indian nationals killed and over 50 were injured. The Prime Minister expressed his deep sorrow at the unfortunate incident and extended condolences to the families of the deceased. He wished speedy recovery of those injured. He also announced ex gratia relief of Rs 2 lakh to the families of deceased. Prime Minister directed that Government of India should extend all possible assistance. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar spoke to his Kuwaiti counterpart Abdullah Ali Al Yahya. Sharing a post on X, Minister Jaishankar said, and I quote, "Spoke to Kuwaiti FM Abdullah Ali Al Yahya on the fire tragedy in Kuwait, appraised of the efforts made by Kuwaiti authorities in that regard, was assured that the incident would be fully investigated and that responsibility will be fixed. Urged the early repatriation of the mortal remains of those who lost their lives. He emphasized that those injured were getting the requisite medical attention." And Minister of State for External Affairs T20 Singh is urgently travelling to Kuwait following a direction from Prime Minister Narendra Modi primarily to oversee assistance to Indians injured in the fire.
The situation is that the victims are mostly burn victims, and some of the bodies have been charred beyond recognition. So DNA test is underway to identify the victim, and Air Force plane is on the ready. And as soon as the bodies are identified, their kin will be informed, and our Air Force plane will bring the bodies back. The latest figures that we had last night, the casualty figures are around 48, 49, out of which 42 or 43 are believed to be our countrymen Indians.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will travel to Italy on Thursday to attend the Group of 7 summit. In his first overseas visit after assuming office for the 3rd time, Prime Minister Modi would join global leaders in attending the G7 summit, which is being held in Italy's Borgo Egnazia from June 13th to 15th. Our correspondent Amritpal Singh reports from Apulia in Italy.
Days after assuming office, Prime Minister Modi will make a day-long visit to Italy to participate in the G7 summit on June 14th. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni had extended an invitation to Prime Minister Modi to attend the G7 summit under her presidency of the global bloc.
The visit assumes a significance as this will be Honorable Prime Minister's first overseas travel after assuming office in his 3rd consecutive term. It will also afford him an opportunity to engage with other world leaders present at the G7 summit on issues of importance to India as also to the global south. Prime Minister will participate in the outreach session along with the other countries invited for the outreach summit.
As world leaders gather here in the picturesque settings by the Adriatic Sea, Prime Minister Modi will be holding bilateral meetings with G7 leaders, including with US President Joe Biden and UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, as also with his Italian counterpart Giorgia Meloni. The Prime Minister on Friday will address an outreach session where he'll address issues related to food security, health and development. Prime Minister Modi will also hold bilateral meetings with his counterparts from other G7 partner countries. The Prime Minister is expected to address issues of the global south, development and climate change.
Meeting between the two Prime Ministers will be a great opportunity to see what has been done in the bilateral ties in the last 2-3 years, but also to give it a more strategic dimension. Participating countries, both the G7 and the partners, will have an opportunity to discuss the important economic issues that are on the global table, and also they will discuss some of the key regional and global issues on the agenda.
The G7 summit is a grouping of the world's 7 most developed economies that include Canada, France, Germany, Japan, the United Kingdom and the United States of America as its member nations. As the Italy summit is largely focused on the ongoing conflicts in West Asia and Ukraine, the G7 is likely to adopt its plan of funding the Ukrainian war chest through frozen Russian assets. India, on its part, would like to stay away from any such move that directly incriminates Russia, thus reiterating its long-standing position that the way forward is through dialogue and diplomacy and not through war. With cameraman Shilendra Chauhan, this is Amritpal Singh in Borgo Enasia, Italy.
India's Foreign Secretary Vinay Mohan Kwatra said that during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Italy, the issue of cross-border terrorism will be raised at the highest level in G7 meet.
So far as the issue of terrorism is concerned and the nature of cross-border terrorism that India faces, I'm sure that in terms of the challenges that such instances pose to the general peace and stability in the region, they would suitably figure in Prime Minister's bilateral conversation as and when it is necessary, depending upon the agenda of bilateral discussions.
The Union Territory of Jammu is witnessing a sudden escalation of terror attacks. It all began on 9th of June when a bus plunged into a gorge after being attacked by terrorists, followed by an attack on a village in Katwa, and then an exchange of fire between terrorists and security forces in Doordarshan district. In a big breakthrough for security coming close on the heels of these terror attacks, 2 terrorists have been neutralized on Wednesday. In last 80 hours, 3 separate attacks have taken place, raising concerns about the law and order situation in the region. Here's a detailed report.
2 terrorists who had opened fire in a Hiranagar village in Jammu and Kashmir's Katwa district late Tuesday night have been neutralized in an encounter. A paramilitary soldier was also martyred in action. 2 encounters that began overnight in Jammu and dragged into the wee hours of morning. This included one in Doordarshan district where 5 soldiers and a special police officer were injured in an attack on an army post. Anand Jain, Additional Director General of Police, Jammu Zone, supervising the anti-terrorist operations in Katwa, shared details of the encounters.
छतरकला में अभी रात को आपको जैसे पता है कि हमारा एक ऑपरेशन आर्मी, सीआरपीएफ, पुलिस सभी का एक जॉइंट ऑपरेशन वहाँ पर उस इलाके में चल रहा था। तो उस जॉइंट ऑपरेशन के तहत जब टेररिस्ट एक्सचेंज ऑफ फायर हुआ है तो उसमें उस इलाके को पूरा कॉर्डन में लिया गया। 2 आतंकवादियों को मार गिराया गया है और अभी सर्च ऑपरेशन इलाके में चल रहा है।
Calling Hiranagar Katwa attack as a fresh infiltration bid, Anand Jain, ADGP, Jammu Zone, did point at Pakistan without naming it and referring it to as a hostile neighbor.
ये हमारा एक हॉस्टाइल नेबर है जिसके यहाँ पर जो पीसफुल हमारा सारा एनवायरनमेंट है उसको डैमेज करने के लिए उसकी हमेशा कोशिश ये रहती है। तो लिहाजा ये जो इन्फिल्ट्रेशन है ये अपीयर टू बी फ्रेश इन्फिल्ट्रेशन.
Jammu has been high on the terror radar, with these attacks being reported from areas known to be free of terrorism traditionally. 2 days earlier, a bus on its way to the Shiv Khori cave temple came under attack in Riyasi district of Jammu. The terrorists opened fire after the bus driver refused to deboard the passengers but lost control and fell into the gorge, killing 9 people, including a toddler, and injuring as many as 33 passengers. The attack was carried out on the directions of Lashkar-e-Taiba commander Abu Hamza as per the Jammu Kashmir police. The Riyasi terror attack was deeply condemned by the entire country. The President of India, the Prime Minister of India, the Home Minister, the Lieutenant Governor of the Jammu and Kashmir all condemned the attack, stating that the perpetrators of this dastardly attack will not be spared. Sakal Bhatt's report for DD India.
And let's take a look at other stories making news today. Police security tightened in Jammu and Kashmir after terror attack. Vehicles being checked in the Thatri area of Doda after an encounter started between security forces and terrorists on Wednesday. As the temperature rises, the incidents of forest fire increase in the different forest areas in Jammu and Kashmir's Rajouri. Incidents of forest fire in the areas in Forest Division of J&K have been on the rise this summer season as soaring temperatures continues to grip the region. Indian Army of Tamil Nadu paid a heartfelt tribute to the brave martyred warriors on the 25th Kargil Commemoration Day. The ceremony held at a solemn venue in Madurai saw the participation of military personnel, veterans and local dignitaries. All 4 gates of Puri Jagannath temple opened for devotees during the Mangala Alati ritual of the deities on Thursday. The temple authorities have made elaborate arrangements to ensure smooth and orderly conduct of ritual. Raipur, the vibrant capital of Chhattisgarh, came alive with colors and flavors to celebrate the king of fruits, mango. At the annual Mango Festival, the festival showcased an array of mango varieties with stalls brimming with Alfonso, Kesar and many more, attracting mango enthusiasts from across the region. And still to come on this edition of DD India Live. Group of 7 leaders to provide Ukraine with $50 billion. NATO defense ministers to discuss the alliance's ongoing support for Ukraine. The Olympic torch explores the secrets of Reunion, the intense island. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Siddharth Bharadwaj. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken vowed on Wednesday to keep pressing to seal a Gaza ceasefire deal, saying that not all Hamas demands were acceptable, but voicing hope that gaps could be closed. Consulting with key mediator Qatar on the Hamas response to US President Joe Biden's plan, Blinken said Hamas could have given a clear and simple yes, but voiced guarded hope for moving forward.
We were waiting on one response, and that was the response from Hamas. And as the Prime Minister said, Last night, we received a response. Hamas has proposed numerous changes to the proposal that was on the table. We discussed those changes last night with Egyptian colleagues and today with the Prime Minister. Some of the changes are workable, some are not.
Hamas said on Tuesday that it was ready to deal positively with the process but stressed the need for Israel to agree to a permanent ceasefire and full withdrawal from Gaza. The Israeli government did not comment, but an anonymous official said the Palestinian armed group's response amounted to a rejection. Israel's Prime Minister has not yet publicly endorsed the proposal, which US President Joe Biden said had been offered by the country when he outlined it 12 days ago. But Blinken said Benjamin Netanyahu had reaffirmed his commitment during a meeting in Jerusalem on Monday. The UN Security Council also passed a resolution supporting the proposal that day, adding to the diplomatic pressure that Washington is exerting. Now, a group of 7 leaders on Wednesday agreed to provide Ukraine with $50 billion via the use of frozen Russian assets by the end of 2024. The agreement was signed ahead of a G7 summit in Italy on Thursday that will focus on backing Kyiv's fight against Russia. G7 leaders had aimed to agree a deal on using the profits from the interest on $325 billion of frozen Russian central bank assets to help Kyiv, using the profits as collateral for a loan of up to $50 billion. And US President Joe Biden will sign a new security agreement with Ukraine on Thursday to pledge America's long-term support to the country. The US President arrived in Italy on Wednesday for the annual summit of leaders from the Group of 7 major democracies. During his meeting with leaders of the Group of 7 democracies, Biden will sign a new security agreement with Ukraine. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan told reporters that the agreement will include a commitment to working with the US Congress on funding Ukraine going forward. The agreement, however, will not commit to using US forces on the ground. He further added that 15 countries have signed the security agreement, which will strengthen Ukraine's defensive deterrence capability. NATO defense ministers will discuss the alliance's ongoing support for Ukraine in the face of Russia's intensifying invasion at a meeting in Brussels today. The ministers are also expected to get closer to agreeing who will become the alliance's next Secretary General. Alex Kadir reports from Brussels. Have a look.
Well, the big focus, like it has so often been at NATO defense ministerial meetings, is going to be on Ukraine. There will be a meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, that is the 31 NATO members plus a handful of other countries interested in supporting Ukraine against Russia's invasion. We know from the US ambassador to NATO that those discussions will focus on Ukraine's immediate and short-term battlefield needs. And the big question is whether or not there will be a change in position from certain NATO allies when it comes to using their weapons to target specific military infrastructure in Russia to help defend parts of Ukraine like Kharkiv, which has been under a lot of pressure recently. So those immediate military needs, and a question is as to whether or not Ukraine should be allowed to hit deeper into Russian territory, all on the agenda for the Ukraine Defense Contact Group and the NATO-Ukraine Council, a formal environment in which Ukrainian officials, Ukrainian ministers can meet with their NATO counterparts to collaborate on those immediate needs, but also on longer term needs like accession discussions. And again, we've had the position from the United States there that there should be a bridge built to help Ukraine get to NATO membership, but that can only happen after the conditions are met and the reforms are seen through by Ukraine. But certainly Ukraine, the focus at this meeting of the NATO defense ministers. Another big question will be whether or not the NATO allies can agree now on the next Secretary General to replace Jens Stoltenberg. Mark Rutte, the outgoing Dutch Prime Minister, is still the favourite, and we understand from NATO officials that a confirmation for the next NATO Secretary General will certainly be reached before July. Alex Kadia in Brussels reporting for DD India.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met with Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Jeddah. Zelensky said that on his Saudi visit, He had held productive and energetic talks with Saudi Crown Prince, focusing on this week's peace summit in Switzerland and improving bilateral ties. Ukraine is bringing together dozens of world leaders and international organizations in Switzerland this weekend to mount pressure on Russia and outline a path towards peace. Former US President Donald Trump's legal team is due to respond Wednesday to a guilty verdict he was given in New York on 34 counts of falsifying business records. It's thought they will ask the judge to overturn the jury's guilty verdict, giving the prosecution until June 27 to respond. Caroline Malone reports.
Donald Trump awaits sentencing after being found guilty of trying to cover up hush money payments to former adult film star Stormy Daniels. His lawyers have said they will appeal. The New York judge in the case must formally approve the verdict and enter a final judgment. He set July 11th for the sentencing hearing. That's a time for the prosecution and defense teams to argue over what punishment Trump should get and for the judge to make a final decision. That will come just days before the Republican Party is likely to officially nominate Trump as their candidate for president, ahead of the GOP convention, where he's due to announce a vice president. Falsifying business records can get someone up to 4 years in prison, but most people, especially first-time offenders like Trump, usually get much less time or just a fine or probation. If he were to be given jail time, though, and then win November's presidential election, he could still serve as the US leader. Caroline Malone in Washington reporting for DD India.
On to business now. The US Federal Reserve announced its interest rate decision on Wednesday after a two-day Federal Open Market Committee meeting, leaving the benchmark interest rates unchanged at 5.25% to 5.5% for the seventh straight meeting. The Fed decided to hold the federal funds rate after the Consumer Price Index reported that inflation was flat month over month in May, less than expected 0.1% increase. After raising the policy rate by 5.25 percentage points since March of 2022 in one of the swiftest Fed reactions to rising price pressures, the central bank has now kept the policy rate on hold since July 2023 to anchor in high inflation and bring it down consistently toward the 2% target range.
My colleagues and I remain squarely focused on achieving our dual mandate goals of maximum employment and stable prices for the benefit of the American people. Our economy has made considerable progress toward both goals over the past 2 years. The labor market has come into better balance with continued strong job gains and a low unemployment rate. Inflation has eased substantially from a peak of 7% to 2.7%, but is still too high. We are strongly committed to returning inflation to our 2% goal in support of a strong economy that benefits everyone.
The S&P 500 and NASDAQ posted record closing highs for a third straight day on Wednesday after inflation data came in softer than expected, but the indexes ended off the day's highs as Federal Reserve projected only one interest rate cut this year. Stocks were choppy following the news and press conference with Fed Chair Jerome Powell, with the S&P 500 and NASDAQ pairing gains late and the Dow finishing near flat. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 35.21 points to 38,712.21. The S&P 500 rose 45.71 points to 5,421.03. And the NASDAQ Composite advanced 264.89 points to 17,608.44. The S&P 500 posted 39 new 52-week highs and 2 new lows. The NASDAQ Composite recorded 99 new highs and 80 new lows. While India confirms a Super 8 spot, registering a 7-wicket win over United States at Nassau County International Cricket Stadium in New York on Wednesday. Put into bat first, the Americans struggled as Arshdeep dismissed Shayan Jahangir and Andreas in the first over. But Steven Taylor and Nitish Kumar set the stage for a competitive total of 110 for 8. Meanwhile, India also struggled at the start with Saurabh sending openers Virat and Rohit back early, but Surya Kumar Yadav and Shivam Dubey steadied the innings and got India over the line with 10 balls to spare. The US, second in Group A with 4 points after suffering their first loss in 3 matches, will also ensure qualification for the next round if they beat Ireland on Friday. The Olympic torch traversed through the remote French island of Réunion on Wednesday. Roughly 100 torchbearers carried the flame across the volcanic island, with legendary handball player Daniel Narcisse finishing the celebrations by lighting the cauldron in his home city of Saint Denis. Earlier, the torch was lit at the landing stage of the first settlement before heading to Pont de Lanzois, which the southernmost pass in Europe. The torch then passed through Plaine des Sables, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The Olympic cauldron will be lit at the opening ceremony on July 26th in Paris. That's all for this edition of DD India Live, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code on the screen to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I am Siddharth Bharadwaj from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Live.